Hi, everybody. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to my channel. My name is Jasmina from Jasmina Brozovik Astrology, and I'm very honored to have Alex Trenoweth with me today. Most of you probably know about her already. She's a long-term astrologer, teacher, and author of many books. And she has a MA in Cultural Astronomy and Astrology from the Faculty of Astrological Studies. She was awarded an honorary PhD from, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce it correctly, Krishnamurti Institute of Astrology, and her groundbreaking research on adolescent behavior and lunar phases. That's excellent. She's an author of Growing Pains, Astrology in Adolescence, and Mirror Mirror, the astrology of famous people and the actors that who portrayed them. And I know she has a new book coming up. She will talk about it later. I had a pleasure to watch her talks on recently on shifts happened with it was a small summit with Steve Jodrick, Levine, Alex, and Penny Thornton. And I thought her lectures were amazing, interesting, passionate, enthusiastic. So, Alex, welcome. How
Thank
are you
you.
today?
Everything's good. Nice warm day here in London, England.
Ah, perfect. Yes. Well, this is it. Yeah, I'm from Canada, so we still have the same king. I just make a little joke. Okay. For everybody who is joining today, Alex will talk about astrology and education and her life experience of how she blended the two, how astrology helped her to be a better teacher. And she give us some pointers for parents and teachers, how can they help their kids in their lives. So, Alex, please tell us, where did this all begin? Just a few words. How did you blend? How did you want to become a teacher? And then how astrology came? And how did you blend those two passions together?
Well, I've known I was going to be a teacher since I was about 6 years old. My mom still has a card that says when I was 6 years old, when I grow up, I want to be a teacher. So my favorite game with my little brother was school. I'd be the teacher, he'd be my student. And but I got into astrology through being very skeptical. I'm a sun Cancer, and my mom was reading. It must have been like a special supplement on astrology, and she was reading. You're a Cancer, you're home loving and shy. Really? And then she read hers. She's a Sagittarius, and she's adventurous and outgoing. And it's just like it was like they were switched around. And so I thought, well, I guess astrology is a little rubbish then. And then when I was at university, my birthday's the 20th of July. So whenever somebody asked me what my sun sign was or my stars were, I would say on the cusp of Leo. I would never own up to being a Cancer. But when I was at university, towards the end of my days at university, a friend was was asking me, "Oh, are you a Leo?" And just to be contrary, I said, "No, I'm a Cancer." Just to prove that astrology is a load of rubbish. And she said something that changed my life. She says, "I bet you have the moon in Leo." And I had never heard of such a thing. So she did a rudimentary chart, just drew up a simple circle divided into 12 like a clock. And so she did the calculations. And to me, it looked like magic. How did she know how to do this? Where did she learn how to do this? It was just fascinating. So she says, well, here we go. You got the sun in Cancer, of course, but you got the moon in Leo. And if I've done my calculations right, you're a Gemini rising, which means Mercury, also in Leo, is your ruling planet. And that changed my life. From that point on, I was obsessed with astrology. Then I moved to England. Then I found the Faculty of Astrological Studies, and I just went in head first and learned as much as I could.
That's amazing. I
But in
love it. Mhm.
if you don't mind me, I'm in teaching. I really struggled because I wanted to be a teacher before I wanted to be an astrologer, but I was really struggling my first year of teaching because it is hell on earth trying to learn how to be a teacher. And I remember thinking to myself, there's no way I can be a teacher. It's too much. I don't have whatever it takes to be a teacher. And I even remember what I was teaching. I was teaching Macbeth. I was an English teacher. And I looked out at my students and I thought, oh my God, you guys all have the same Jupiter sign because we teach children by year groups, more or less. I mean, they might have, there might be the adjacent sign as well. And I thought you guys all had the same Saturn signs. And then I was like, aha, now I got you. Now I know.
Yeah.
Learn. And from then on, my job became infinitely easier. And I fully credit astrology for keeping me in the teaching profession for so long.
That's
Because
amazing.
most teachers don't last more than 5 years. I've lasted for over 25.
Wow, wow. That's a yes. That's brilliant. That's what I really got it from your speech, and shifts happened as well. You're I love that. I was wondering. I know because you have been a teacher of many different subjects, and you taught kids from age 3 to age 18, probably.
Yep.
Yeah, so many different things. You have a lot of experience. So, um, which age do you think needs more help? Like which age is it 3-year-old or 14-year-old, or is just a different approach? And what do you feel that maybe parents should look at and how can we help with astrology?
Okay, I'm going to say adolescence is the most
Mhm.
important age of a child.
Okay.
And unfortunately, we have the attitude towards teenagers, that age between ages about 12 to 15, that, oh, they'll just grow out of it, that we can ignore them. And we do this in education as well, which infuriates me because during that time is when the brain is rewiring itself. That's not an astrological thing, that's a neurological thing. It actually happens.
Mm.
And if we can understand a child's Jupiter sign, we can actually help them to learn more. But what happens in education is we ignore the younger adolescents and focus on the exam years who are having their first Saturn opposition around the age of 14 or 15. So also the age of 13 is the most difficult year of a child's life. And even when I speak to adults about being 13, they get all embarrassed and a little bit twitchy. They don't want to talk about their first time of doing anything. If you think about it, your first time falling in love, your first kiss,
Mm.
these are all things you don't want to remember because they're embarrassing. And on top of all the physical changes that you have to go
Yeah.
through. And I remember, you know, developing as a woman, and suddenly people weren't interested in hearing what I had to say. They were interested in how I looked, and they weren't looking at my face. And that made me extremely uncomfortable as a young girl, a young woman growing up. And I know from doing surveys that 13 is also the age group no teacher wants to teach, because they're the most difficult behavior wise. And there is a huge, boys tend to be in more trouble than girls. Girls get in trouble for different reasons. But I think that adolescence is the most important time of year. And if you want me to even narrow it down even more, I'm going to say the Jupiter return is the most important time. So I often advise parents to prioritize, not ignore the other children, but prioritize the Jupiter return children. That's the time for a family holiday abroad. That's the time to learn a different language. It's the time to explore different religions to help that child develop their own personal philosophy, to understand who they are. We do this kind of
Mhm.
naturally, culturally, with the big change from the elementary school into the secondary school or high school or middle school, whatever we're going to
Mhm.
call it, where the child goes to a bigger school. So we kind of do it naturally, but I also think there's a lot of things that are lost in that transition, between
Mhm.
the smaller school and the bigger school, and children can get overwhelmed and they can disengage from their education if they're not looked after. And I'm always going to say they are not looked after at that age. They're ignored for the exam years.
That's amazing. Yeah. So not only that, there's a Jupiter return, as you mentioned, there is a Saturn opposition happening at the same time. What else
Same,
astrologically happens at that time?
sorry, not at the same time. So they have their Jupiter
Yes.
return, 11 to 12,
Oh
and then
yes.
maybe 3 or 4 years later they have the Saturn opposition. So I'm saying that
Mhm.
period of time, those 3 or 4 years of adolescence are important, and they're ignored in education. So yeah,
Yeah.
I say really focus on those. Don't ignore your teenager. That's the time to listen to them. That's the time to build trust. um, Children of that age will naturally want to be independent from their parents, but they're not ready yet, not financially, not
Yeah.
emotionally. They're not ready to make separation, but they will so desperately want to. And so that's important for the parent to be the Saturn, to step in there and say, okay, if you want your freedom, you need to do X, Y, and Z. You need to show me that you can handle the responsibility. Because we also know that adolescents show extremely poor decision-making skills. They do things that make no sense to the adults. A child who doesn't get into trouble at all will suddenly hotwire a car because their friends tell them to. They stop listening to the authority figures and start listening to their friends. So the other thing I say to parents is make sure you have that talk with your children about sexuality, because it's better that who do you want them to hear it from you as a parent or from their friends?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I remember me as a 13. It was really bad.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I was. It's just said first thing that comes to mind. I'm embarrassed. Like this is the first thing. Oh my god, the way I talk to my mom, the way I behave. Like it's oh my god. But yeah, I hear you. So okay, so hi everybody for joining. So I think this is Debbie. So she asked, could that be the transition time 0 to 7, 7 to 14, 14 to 21? Would you group according to Saturn cycle
Oh, yeah. She's
the
right. She's got
development?
the right numbers. 0 to 7 is the first
Mhm.
Saturn square
Okay.
by transition. So I'm talking transiting Saturn to natal Saturn is the first square. The opposition is roughly from, it'll be the opposite Saturn, transiting Saturn to the natal Saturn. And
Yeah.
then at 21 is the closing square to natal Saturn. And then we have the Saturn return at around the age of 29. Now, the way I like to mark those out is by looking, Saturn rules the hard part of the body,
Hmm.
the nails, the hair, the skin, and the teeth. So at 7, a child loses the front teeth, right? And then
Hmm.
they get the permanent teeth that come in that have to be taken care of for the rest of their lives. In the teenage years, a lot of children have to have orthodontic work.
Yeah.
They have to have braces. And then at 2021, most people get their wisdom teeth coming in. Even Plato talked about this, which messes up your orthodontic work. So maybe you have to have some repositioning going on. And then hopefully, when you get your Saturn returns, you don't lose your teeth. You get to hold on to your teeth. But I think Saturn, marks
Yes.
itself out in the structure, the bone structure, and the um, dental structure.
Yeah. Even the skin. It's interesting. I noticed the skin because Saturn is also skin. It protects
Mm.
us, right? So there's a change in the skin as well. Pimples come up. There's a bunch of stuff anyway. Anu, hi Anu. She says hi Jasmine and Alex. Great topic on highlighting the changes during adolescence. So her question is, do you see a big shift after year 10, age 14, 15?
Of course, and those are exam years here in England, and 10 to 15 in America, because I was educated in the States. I remember choosing the topics that I was going to study at university. Also, because I grew up in a poor family, I remember my dad had this big talk to me when I was about 13 or 14, because I was always talking about being a teacher. My dad said to me, I'm a truck driver. I can't afford to put you through university. If you want to go to university, you're going to have to study. And so I made it a point of reading every single book in the library. But if you look at that age, that 14, 15-year-old, I mean, that is when they really have an idea of what they're going to do with the rest of their lives. And they're choosing the topics they want to study. They're already making decisions around, what electives they're going to take to prepare them for university. So you have a vague idea of what it is you're going to do, and every decision you make from that point on really has a knock-on effect to where you end up after you graduate.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Yeah. A parent should support, be a little Saturn, and support them in a way, right, during those years.
yeah,
Or
and also, I mean, we all can't be university graduates. Not
yeah,
everybody wants to go on to university, and I think that we do a lousy job of encouraging people to take
yeah,
trade. We need
yeah,
electricians, we need plumbers. Not everybody can be a bookworm.
yeah.
And just because somebody is a bookworm doesn't mean they're smarter than the plumber. And
I
the reason
agree,
why
100%.
is because I had to call a plumber in today to fix my kitchen sink because I couldn't do it. Right? I have all these degrees and I can't fix my own sink. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
You
we
know,
need those people very much, and yeah, that's also nobody talks about that kind of discrimination, but there is a silent discrimination based on your education level, right? That you in the society, which is not fair actually. um, I know during your talk on shifts happened, I'm going to reflect on that because it's fresh in my mind. You discussed the example of those three celebrities, Drew Barrymore and Leonardo DiCaprio and Angelina Jolie, and now you mentioned something about them being more responsible or rebellious. So, can you just tell us the story about that? How we can find out if our kid is more mature or less mature, or what is the connection with astrology and that? I thought that was fascinating.
yeah, sure. I mean, so I'm going to do a talk for the Brighton Astrology Group
Hmm.
on the topic on the 18th of June. So if you want to hear more specifically how to calculate it, come join us. Um,
Excellent.
so that's good because in a short interview we don't have enough time to explore it. But I will say that in my research on child development, I tended to focus on the hard aspects, transiting aspects, the
Mhm.
conjunctions, the squares, and the oppositions. However, during the teenage years, at the age of 13, they have some very interesting aspects from transiting Jupiter sextile to its natal position, as well as the first Ptolemaic aspect from an outer planet, Uranus sextile Uranus. And what I'm saying is, if a child has the Jupiter sextile first, they tend to be somebody who maybe gets along better in school, who wants to do well in school, who maybe might be a little bit more studious than the rebel who has the Uranus sextile to its natal position. And maybe the rebel just needs a firmer guidelines, clearer guidelines, not
Mhm.
about being more strict, but about being clear. This is acceptable behavior. And the Jupiter too, I mean, they're not immune to misbehaving either, because Jupiter was a bit of a naughty god himself. He was known for
Oh yeah.
breaking the rules and infidelity and all sorts of things. So they're two very different planets, but if you put them together, they're experiencing these sextiles in the same year at the age of 13. We put the keywords together, Jupiter being big, Uranus being rebellion, we got big rebellion. Another reason why I'm saying 13 is the most challenging year of a child's life, and parents cannot be complacent with this year. They need to be on the ball. They can't just say, oh, well, they won't be 13 forever. Well, I'm afraid because of the brain development going on, you are 13 forever, because this is the time that bad habits are formed. You can
Oh,
look on Wikipedia and think back to yourself, your first cigarette, your first drink, the
yes,
first time,
yes.
whatever. It's 13. But you can also foster good habits too, learning how to sing, play the guitar, learning how to draw. This is why I'm so passionate about our arts being protected, and not being the first subjects that are cut during budget cuts for education. We need arts, music, just as much as we need English or whatever language, maths, and science. Children need a creative outlet, and parents can foster that. Don't just send your child to school and say, oh, well, free babysitting, and then go off and do your thing, pick your kid up, and then question, oh, what have you learned in school today? You need to carry on that education in the home and make sure that your child has opportunities outside of school. The school does a lot, but it can't do everything for your
Ah,
child.
that is true. Yeah, parent. Yeah, so it's like a shared responsibility between parents and teachers in helping children develop and help them prepare for the life. In a sense, that's amazing.
Yeah,
So,
teaching is one of those professions where, everybody thinks that they can tell a teacher how to do their job.
yeah.
Everyone has an opinion, but until you're in the classroom for 25 years, I don't want to hear your opinion. Unless you have the experience I do, don't tell me how to do my job. Oh, and you know what I'd love? I love it when a parent tells me, I pay your salary because I pay taxes. My instant response is, well, I pay taxes too. Where's my teaching assistance? Where's my
Yeah.
extracurricular help? Where's my pay rise?
Yeah, no, it's hard. I know, and especially you have a big classes. I think that's a major problem. I have one child only, and just to focus on him. So if you have more children, so imagine having like 15, 20, 30. I know when I was in high school, there was 38 of us in the class. Come on, it's not possible to have 38 people. Um,
Well, I mean, if you're going to
I
have
don't know.
classes that big, then have the teaching assistants as well. I mean, I
Yeah.
teaching assistants are so important in a classroom.
Mm.
Okay, yeah, one teacher, but we need extra pairs of hands, even volunteers. People who can help us. And I think one thing that I would really like to see more of for the Jupiter return children are more class trips. However, asking a classroom teacher to take them on trips is unreasonable because a classroom teacher is already in the classroom 5 days a week, uh, and working at the weekends as well. They can't possibly take on that load. What we need are more adults who can volunteer or who can be paid to look after the children during the school trips.
Yeah, so that's around 11, 12, right? That's the Jupiter return. That's what this is, like sixth grade, seventh grade. I don't know which.
Um,
How do you
yes,
do it in England?
sixth grade, seventh grade. Yes, that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So I was actually, I grew up in Croatia. There was a totally different regime there and different thing, but we had a little trip. It was called like a little mini trip that happened in the beginning of the grade 8 or the end of the grade 7. So we were like around that, and we had like a weekend. It was a part of the curriculum, and I think it was very good. I think it was very good because it gave us a, we kind of gave us opportunity to be a little bit of independent that we kind of all yearned for at that age, and just be away from the parents and teach something, and have this bond with our friends outside of the school. It was just amazing. Yeah, you're right. uh, Anu says, I teach in UK schools with teens. If the moon is in Aries or is in a challenging aspect, there is a lot of energy in the classroom. Oh, during the transiting moons in Aries. Do you have the same experience?
No, I'm going to say forget about the moon. I mean, I'm not sure if we talk about the natal moon or whatever, but what I do find significant
Mhm,
is the phases of the moon.
mhm,
So, completely like unexpectedly, I was doing so when I was teaching secondary school. I now teach all grades. In the States, you would call it a substitute teacher. Over
mhm.
here, we call it supply. So if I say supply, I mean substitute. Um, um, so I teach lots of different classes, lots of different subjects now. But when I was full time secondary school, I was head of year. So all the behavior reports came to me, and I was in charge of one specific year group. And I was working alongside of people who were also in charge of one specific year group. And so the behavior reports would come to us directly,
Mhm.
and we were having a bad day in our office. It just seemed to us like we were like overwhelmed with these behavior reports. And because my colleagues knew that I was an astrologer, one of them piped up and said very sarcastically to me, "Must be a full moon." And I thought to myself, wait, hold on. It's not a full moon. It's actually a new moon. And so that set off me collecting behavior data. And after 30,000 behavior reports over a 7 year time, what I discovered was actually it's the new moon when children misbehave the most.
Wow.
And then I took girls out of the equation, forget about menstrual cycles for a second. And then what I found out is that even boys are affected by the new moon. More behavior problems at the new moon rather than the full moon. And then I looked at nodes,
Mm.
not the eclipses. Actually, the new moons at higher latitude is when we experience more poor behavior. And that could
Wow.
be a number of different things. It could be maybe the teachers are more sensitive and more touchy. It could be, I attribute it to the circadian cycle that's so disturbed, the sleeping cycle of teenagers that's so
Mm.
disturbed, because teenagers can't sleep the way they did when they were younger. When they were younger, you can put them to bed at 8 o'clock in the
Mhm.
evening and get them up at 6, and they'll be fine. Teenagers are not like that. They cannot fall asleep early. They stay up until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, but yet are still expected to get up at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. Then they sleep in at the weekends, which really messes up their circadian cycle. So they come in Monday morning being extra tired. This is called sleep debt. What do they do if they're sleepy? They buy those energy drinks, which are actually illegal to purchase here in England, but the kids do it. They find a way of doing it. And so it creates this sleep debt, which I think contributes to the poor behavior at the new moon. Because at the full moon, children sleep a little bit less at the full moon than at the new moon. So they are wider awake at the new moon, have more energy to get into trouble. So that's my theory.
Wow. Excellent tip. That's a great. Okay, a few more questions. And who is asking, what is your opinion of forest schools? I don't know what it is. So,
This must be a Londoner. I love the
Yes.
idea of forest schools. I mean, forest schools. So just to explain, I was going to interject about when I was a teenager, a young adolescent. I had scouts to go to. I was a kind of a Girl Scout, and
Mhm.
we got to go out and do camping and stuff like that. But I actually know one of the leading teachers in the forest schools, and I greatly admire all the stuff that she brings. So children do, as it sounds, go out to the forest. They learn how to forage for food, how to identify plants. They learn all this really fascinating, how to sterilize their own water, how to build a fire, all these great things that they need, for survival. And not just that, but other things as well. Getting them out in the fresh air.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge fan of forest schools. And I think this person's trying to get me to say a little bit about homeschooling.
Okay,
Well,
please do.
okay. I mean, I love the idea of homeschooling. But I also think that, if you're going to homeschool your child, you need to be subject to the same rules that anybody else that goes to a regular school is subject to. That is, you have to be inspected to make sure that you're meeting the national curriculum, and making sure that a child's basic needs are being met. Because we don't want to be in a situation where a child is in a not a very good situation. Not that this happens often, but it's something just to be aware of, that we're looking after children even if they are being educated at home.
Yes, sometimes there's a domestic. I don't want to go into there, but there's domestic violence, and then a homeschooling becomes into some. Anyway, I
A,
watch too many crime stories. To be
a lot of children come to school to get their hot meal for the day. A lot of children come to school to be
Yeah.
protected. I know from
Mm.
working in child protection that a lot of children feel safer at school than they do at home, and that's really
So sad.
unfortunate. So
Very sad.
we're all about protecting our children and making sure that they have the same opportunities as everybody else does, whether they're in school or educated at home.
Yeah, thank you for that. Myra is asking, hi Myra. She goes, Alex, what's the subjects that kids 13 to 14 enjoy the most and why? And
Okay,
that,
well, anything that really gets them. Are you really going to ask that question about 13, 14-year-olds, what they enjoy talking and learning about? I think you can imagine. So, no, the topics, school subjects, let's be specific. The school subjects that they enjoy, I think, depends on their Jupiter sign. So if you
Mhm.
have, let's say, Jupiter in Sagittarius, you might have students who really enjoy learning about the law, learning about religious education, but it doesn't mean that you can just teach those subjects. They have to have a well-rounded education. And the way I use Jupiter signs is, say, for example, the mutable signs. I'll have something called carousel learning, which means I break them down into groups of 4 or 5, and they have different activities around the classroom that they do. So they do one activity, then they go on to the next, carousel learning,
Oh,
different topics.
mhm.
For the fixed signs, I know that they have to have a good deal of warning before we change topics. We have to, keep to the timetable. Okay, it's coming to the end of half term. We're going to go on to this topic next, because they feel a little bit uneasy if things change too quickly. And with the cardinal signs, speed rounds, all those sort of things are anything to do with, how fast can you answer a question, are things that they really enjoy.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I
Jupiter
can
sign.
attest. I can attest to the. I have a Jupiter in Cancer, and just the subject. I always loved history, always.
You have Jupiter and Cancer. Yes, I always loved history too. Um,
And
yep. I
yeah,
and I found, but I found for teaching Jupiter and Cancer, I always found them a challenge. It could be because my own Jupiter is in Cancer. I
hmm
always found Jupiter and Cancer students a challenge, because there always has to be an emotional context
yes,
for that. They have to understand the emotions behind it,
yeah, yeah,
before they can really engage.
yeah, yeah. That is true. That is true. I just think I had home economics just for 1 year, and then they turned it off, and I was so sad because I really enjoyed cooking and making a
Hmm.
soup in the class, but they said it's outdated and they didn't do it anymore, which is ridiculous.
Well,
Ah,
I
and
worked at a school where they had a home ec sort of
mm,
afternoon once a week where everybody took it. So the boys were learning how to sew,
yeah,
how to shop, how to cook, and they also had sort of a more practical, like how to how to rewire a switch and things like that. How to fix a sink. Obviously I missed out on those lessons, but that they were really practical. But yet, I
Yeah.
also got to say, the parents have to take a little bit of responsibility.
Mm.
I cannot. I find it really irritating when people say, "Oh, here goes another day I didn't learn algebra," because my first instinct is, "Oh, well, that's your fault." you know,
Yeah.
you probably use algebra all the time. You just don't know it. But so parents can't just send their children to school and just think that the school is going to be responsible for their entire education.
Yeah, yeah, and I remember you from the talk. You said we are not babysitters, we're teachers, and it stuck into my head. Just to as a reminder, as a mother, when I talk to a teacher, just in general. Um,
I wish I was paid like a babysitter. 12 pounds an hour per child. Well, it's 30 times 12. Yeah, let's go. That's what,
plus,
350 pounds an hour. Let's go. I love it. I love that idea.
yeah, plus oh, you have snacks and drinks in the fridge. Help yourself, extra on top of the. Anyway, another question. Okay, Debbie says apparently, I think this is in Germany. Teenagers like to sleep in and therefore learn more efficiently if they go to school later on the day. So they organize for their day extended to later in the day.
I suggested this in my talk. I
Hmm.
said, what is the problem with starting school at noon? Let the teenagers sleep in. If they can't go to sleep until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, let them sleep. Okay, let them go. Then they could do a full day of school. They can come home at 6 or 7 in the evening, have their lunch or evening meal or whatever, and do what they need to do. Let that circadian cycle play itself out. You know, why do
Yeah,
we
yeah, yeah.
get up so early? It's.
I was lucky. I mean, back in Croatia, when I was in the 80s, when I was in the early 90s, when I had this, we had two shifts. So we had 8 to 2 and then 1 to 7 in the afternoon.
I had
So
that.
yeah. So I always liked, oh, I have this week, I have the afternoon week. So I always liked that one because I can sleep. And anyway, so that was interesting. I wanted to ask you something before we switch to a book, but I just can't remember. So please tell us more. I know you have this great book on adolescence, but you have something else that is coming up. So what is your new book all about? I think it's excellent. So please tell us more.
Yes, it's called Zeus on the Loose,
Hmm.
Unleashing Your Inner Thunderbolt. And I'm focusing on Jupiter cycles. And so Growing Pains did both Jupiter and Saturn cycles, but I just wanted to do a full book on Jupiter. So I take each sign, describe it, and go through each of the phases that Jupiter goes. It gives the parents or teachers suggestions of activities the children will enjoy at that particular age. And I go all the way through. But I also challenge parents, you know, just because you're
Hmm.
not a kid anymore doesn't mean that Jupiter no longer has an effect on you. You can also unleash your inner thunderbolt by studying. So it's aimed at parents, but it's also all about Jupiter's unlimited. So it's also about the parent taking on board the opportunities. Just because you're getting a little bit older and maybe you can't run as fast as you used to, doesn't mean that you can't do other things that are going to be exciting. That nothing is stopping you from taking on new interests. Nothing is stopping you from traveling. Adventures await. Seize Jupiter.
Yeah, I like that.
Oh,
Even if you can't afford, yeah, even if you can't afford, I don't know, travel far away, you can travel, but just watching documentaries. Literally, I used to soak them up as a kid. I would
armchair,
travel over, right?
armchair traveling. We all did it during the pandemic, right?
Right. Yes. And I know my father had a National Geographic subscription. I would just each month I would just go through that. It was my way of escaping. But so that's yeah, excellent. Another thing. Oh yeah, when the new book is when is it coming up? I know you have something coming up in August, I believe.
Yes.
So
The 13th of August is the book launch.
okay.
This is a really important book launch because it's being launched at one of the main booksellers in England. It's called Waterstones. 13th of August, 7 p.m. It falls on my Jupiter return, actually, my fifth Jupiter return. But it's exciting because what I'm hoping it will do is it will open up opportunities for other astrology authors to get their work into a major bookseller. Because if you go to Waterstones, the astrology selection isn't very good. So I'm hoping, that I can hold the door open for other really good astrology books to make its way into the mainstream.
That's great. So it'll be open for to public. So all of you, my friends, I know we have a lot of friends in London, in UK. Please make
Oh,
sure.
please, in London, please come.
Yes, I think it's going to be amazing. I don't know if I'm going to make it, but okay. So a few tips, just because we have Jupiter in Cancer coming up soon, and we have those. I know a lot of friends of mine have kids who are now 11, 12. Um, so just give us a few tips, maybe more about Jupiter in Cancer. What would you suggest? So going on a trip is number one. Take your family together and go on a trip. That's what else would you kind of just quick tips for this
Well,
upcoming generation?
um, because Jupiter is the home, there are
Mhm.
things like, you can encourage your child to decorate their bedroom. Jupiter in Cancer tends to love like little cubby holes, like places where they can withdraw and do their reading or have their own little activities away from everybody else so they can just be on their own. A trip to the seaside.
Mm.
Um, you know, um, I'll stop short of saying a seafood dinner.
Yeah, no, I like
But
that.
trips to the beach, anything to do, well, water in general. I think would be something, maybe learn how to water ski, or even how to snow ski. Things like that that will really, because you want them to, with Jupiter, you want to take advantage and give them opportunities to express their courage. So I think sports is a natural way that we can that can be done. But I think, improving the home, giving them little tasks to do, getting them involved in the family budget. I know that parents don't like to talk about money with their children, but children need to hear you talk about it. That there isn't some magic fairy that comes along and pays the light bill.
Yeah.
Teach them about how to budget, teach them how to cook, how to manage the
Mhm.
family food budget. These are all little tasks that Jupiter and Cancer will really enjoy doing. I was lucky because when I was having my Jupiter return, my mother had my little sister. So I didn't know anything about
Wow.
astrology back then, but I got to pretend to be my little sister's mother, changing her
Wow.
diet, feeding her, care, comforting her when she cried. And that really was fortunate for me. But I think anything along the lines of encouraging childcare, looking after little cousins, but falling short of that, the food budget is, or helping to cook,
I
or
like
learning
that.
how to take on certain cuisines, or learning how to bake bread, or how to decorate a cake. All these things are going to be really handy for Jupiter and Cancer children. And another bad idea for boys as well. Just in
Of
general.
course, when you look at it, there are more many famous male chefs in the world, right? So cooking is not female oriented at all.
Absolutely. One of the most famous chefs, Julia Child. She kind of paved
Yes.
the way for those guys. She was
Yeah.
not just, she wasn't French, and she wasn't really a chef, but she paved the way for these guys. But yeah, it's Oh, but you know what? Just to backtrack slightly, I just want to give a little bit of advice to the women that are listening.
Okay.
Um, okay, never ever thank a man for washing the dishes or for doing the laundry. They
Yeah.
are to be respected. Don't thank them, because they need to be taking care of the home too. It's not just the woman's responsibility. So that's my advice. I've been saying that to my daughter ever since she was, old enough to talk. And never thank daddy for washing the dishes.
I like that. That's a good tip. Myra has a question. What about Jupiter in Cancer and emotional struggles? Is this a possible scenario for these teenagers, early teens?
Sure. I mean, any sign's going to have emotional struggles. Now, what I found challenging about Jupiter and Cancer students is that they are so keen to help the child with special needs, or to help
Mm.
the child who's struggling with a certain skill, that they forget about themselves. So, they need to kind of keep their, you know, let a teacher do their job. There will be somebody who will help the child with special needs. They need to do their own work. It's always nice that they want to help, but they also have their own work to do, not to let them become distracted. And might sound like you're encouraging selfishness, but you're also encouraging self-sufficiency, which is what Jupiter and Cancer needs to learn as well.
It's about nurture after all. So it needs to be nurtured, right? Like any. any sign, any like moon. Like we need to feed our moon, we need to feed our Jupiter. Especially in Cancer, it needs to be nurtured. I feel so.
Yeah.
Nurture its needs. Okay, before I have one more question before we kind of close up. So, is there a place for astrology in schools or no? Or if yes, in what way and when and how? Or what do you feel?
Okay, so I think a lot of people think when I say astrology in education, they think me teaching astrology
I know.
in schools. Okay, what I mean is, I'm although I sneak it in all the time, you'd be surprised at what I do to sneak astrology in. I was actually, let me back up a little bit too. And I'm saying this that I was banned from using astrology, banned from telling anybody I was an astrologer. I worked in a Christian academy because my given name isn't Alex. I have another name that I don't want anybody to use. And I asked the head teacher on my first day of employment, would you mind calling me Alex? And so she Googled Alex Trenoweth and she came up with my astrology. And she pulled me into her office and said, in no uncertain terms, that if a parent complained about my astrology work, I could be dismissed for gross misconduct, for bringing the school into disrepute. So I wasn't allowed really to talk too much about astrology. But banning me from doing something is a sure way of guaranteeing I'm going to try to squeeze it in somehow. And there is enough astrology, enough astronomy, I should say, the science of astronomy, that you can talk about lunar phases. I did a lunar gardening experiment looking at this. I used the sidereal zodiac, and I talked about all sorts of different things that were astrological without attributing a meaning to it. I taught, teachers how to use astrology in the classroom without using the language of astrology. When I'm doing my seating plans, and I put, I've usually in an academic year, there's two Jupiter signs. So let's say, for example, I have Jupiter in Aries and Jupiter in Pisces. In my seating plans, I will put a Jupiter in Aries next to the Jupiter in Pisces, and the Jupiter in Aries will keep the Jupiter in Pisces awake, whereas the Jupiter in Pisces will allow that Jupiter in Aries to use their imagination and creative skills. So
Wow.
I can put that on my seating plan because we have to justify our choices in seating plan without using the language of astrology. So, I think there's lots of scope for using astrology. Where people get touchy about it is when we're attributing a meaning. Now,
Hmm.
the other reason why I think that the head teacher was fussy about me not claiming to be an astrologer is that, she was worried that I might make a prediction. Oh my God, a prediction. Okay, well, as a teacher, I make 6,000 predictions per year. Okay, if I have 240 students over a 2-week rolling rota, and I have to do grade predictions every half term, well, I mean that's a lot of predictions. And my predictions of as a teacher can do more harm than anything I could say as an astrologer. My predictions as a teacher can determine what stream a child goes into. It can determine what topics they study when they go to choose their exam topics. I can completely screw up a relationship between a parent and the child, a parent teacher's evening, right? I can do more damage as a teacher than anything I can say as an astrologer. So, all this stuff about prediction, it's a bit of nonsense if you ask me. But I take the point. We don't want to predict,
Yeah.
where a child's going to land and stuff like that.
Yes, but I remember I have a full nine house, and I always look at my teachers as gods in a way. I always find all my teachers, if I anyway, my teachers were very important in my life. And I remember in fourth grade, one of the teachers said that I was very rash, and you make these mistakes, and it stuck in me so hard that I thought, oh, I cannot beat this. This is who I am. This is what he told me I am, and it just stuck in me. It took me years later to figure out that I need to get that his impression of me. Just anyway, it just stuck to a kid when how you approach them. So teachers and parents need to be careful the words we choose
Yeah.
and how we frame it. So it's about how we frame astrology and the way we can use it, but just how we frame it in a soft. So you kind of suggesting a soft approach, not direct.
Well,
Or
I'm saying that our job. I see my job as a teacher is to hold doors open, not to close them in a student's face. I need to say, okay, well, you're really good at this, but hey, here's something else you might be interested in. Because when you're young, you have the time that you can explore, which is all about what Jupiter is, exploring, trying new things, it's all about, getting that experience. And, even if you don't like it, you can say, well, I didn't like it. Um, I hated algebra when I was a teenager, but now I love algebra. Like I say, we do it all the time anyway.
Yeah.
So I just think, wow, you thought your teachers were gods. I wish I taught you.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I would probably love you. Trust me, I would love you. I was really my history teacher in high school. I don't. It was. The other friends were kidding me. You're in love with the teacher. I said I wasn't in love with him. I was in love with the way he taught. The way he taught us history through examples, through stories. He was a storyteller, and I was just mesmerized. It was so fun. Like, which vegetable came from the Americas to Europe, and then we were kind of had to guess. Like, it was just so. It was fun. It wasn't boring, how history can be like he was engaging us anyway, but
That's
everybody
another,
was making fun of me. Yeah.
that's another thing that Jupiter and Cancer would be good at, is the family narrative, looking at genealogy,
Yeah. Oh, I
telling
love that.
a story.
Oh,
That's important for to understand the roots of where you've come from.
I, I have the whole family tree, Alex. I put my
I,
dad aside.
yep, me.
There you go. So that's very important. Excellent. So there's an activity for all of you who have kids now going to their first Jupiter return. Sit them down, do a family tree together. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun for you and for them to explore, who was when and what did the ancestor did. Like your grandfather wasn't this person and they did this in life or whatever. It's
Who
fun.
got the family nose? Who got the bad eyesight? The color, all these things are fascinating to Jupiter and Cancer.
Yeah,
Well,
strong
any
belief.
child, really, to understand where you come from, I think it's important.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh, thank you, Alex, so much. Before we close this conversation, please tell everybody. I know I put in the descriptions where they can find you, but what do you have now coming up? I know you have a book launch in August, August 13th. You already mentioned, but what else? Oh, Brighton. You're going to do a lecture for Brighton
Yes,
school
June 18th.
on the 8th. Yeah. So what else are you doing? What else are you doing this year? So,
I hold classes on
oh yes.
astrologers who are interested in learning how to work with children's charts ethically. So I do a 5-week or a 10-week course. I also do a course, just a 1-day course on um, child safeguarding and child protection in astrology. So
Mhm.
if you think that you are interested in doing children's charts, I want to talk to you about safeguarding, what you can do and what you cannot do when working with children's charts. So I'm right in the middle of the course now, but I will be restarting probably mid-July. So if you go to my website,
Mhm.
www.alextrenoweth, spell my surname right, TRENOWETH.co.uk, and you'll go to Rohini, Rohini Academy of Astrology, RAA, and just look at the flip down chart, and you can um, either ask me questions or whatever, or sign up if you like. But my courses are quite popular these days, which is good.
Excellent. Excellent. That's great news. Thank you so much, Alex, for your
Thank
time
you.
and for your knowledge and insights. This was great. Thank you, everybody, for asking questions. I hope this was useful for everybody as well. See you next time. Until then, bye bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye.